Brookview Circle mitigation, you wanna?
Yeah, we've been in communication with the residents of Brookview Circle regarding the continuing and recurring flooding events at Brookview Circle. And met last month with Bobby Fossmeyer and the rest of the residents. Bobby is the resident coordinator activities, and Richard Verville was there also from the State Hazard Mitigation Office, and they're both here this evening to request the town's cooperation in further identifying some potential remediation solutions to their issue.
Yeah, would you like to come forward, please?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bobby Fossmeyer. I live at 13 Brookview Drive. And for those who are not familiar with Brookview Drive, we're the most flooded street in Londonderry. In fact, in the last 33 years, Brookview Drive has been flooded 27 times, sometimes twice in 1 year. Roughly over 34 years ago, a developer came to Londonderry, wanted to build homes in this area, and he was denied 4 times by the town council. But somehow on the 5th time, miraculously, he was approved. When the first foundation went in, it sank, so they built another foundation on top of the other foundation, and thus begins the history of Brookview Drive. In the last 10 years, with all the new development in Londonderry, the flooding has become more severe and more constant. I've been on Brookview Drive for 10 years. I've been flooded 7 times, 4 of which water has been in my house. We've, as residents, have met with the town manager, David Karen. We appreciate that he's been at every one of the meetings to discuss, to try to alleviate our flooding problem. We've met with former Congressman Jeb Bradley's aides to try to discuss some ways to alleviate the flooding problems with no resolve. Just recently, though, Congresswoman Carol Shea Porter reached out to the residents of Brookview and was able to get in touch with the Army Corps of Engineers, who just did a second study on the area and concluded that even if they had dredged the brooks and made them deeper, it would not alleviate the flooding problems of Brookview Drive. Brookview Drive was built in between 2 brooks, Black Brook and Beaver Brook, so every time there's flooding, there's no place for the water to go but on the street itself. Which brings us here today with a new option that we've been presented by. It's very hard to be a victim of Mother Nature, but it's far more worse to be a victim of human error. So we're hoping that present-day council could help right a wrong that was done 34 years ago. And on behalf of the residents of Brookview Drive, I'd like to introduce Mr. Richard Verville from the Office of Mitigation from FEMA to discuss this option, which I believe might be our final option.
Please.
Hey, thank you. Again, my name is Richard Verville. I work for the state of New Hampshire as a state hazard mitigation officer with New Hampshire Homeland Security and Emergency Management. If you don't know, we're part of the Department of Safety. Our agency is charged to administer the FEMA programs in the state of New Hampshire. Mr. Fossmeyer asked me to come down to a meeting about a month ago. Mr. Karen attended that. He had called me looking to see if there were any grants that they were eligible for as individual residents to mitigate the flooding hazards on their road. The FEMA grants are available, but they're available, the community must be the applicant. It can't be applied by a citizen within the community. There are 5 different mitigation programs, and certainly by looking at Brookview, and there are 2 programs, 3 programs actually in particular that that seem to fit this type of mitigation activity, whether it be acquiring the homes, removing them, and then the property becomes owned by the town and left as open space and can never be built on again. There's the pre-disaster mitigation grant program, and that's an annual program provided by FEMA. Typically, there's about $100 to $150 million annually put in for programs such as acquiring homes, elevating homes, reducing flooding risks. Again, that's nationally competitive. So an application that the town of Londonderry would put in would compete against any other community in the nation, for these funds. New Hampshire's been very successful in that. Last year, we received just over $1 million in pre-disaster mitigation money in that program, and we've funded several projects through that. Second program, for those who have flood insurance, so their structures are protected by the National Flood Insurance Program, is the Flood Mitigation Assistance Program. And again, the same type projects, acquisition of the homes or elevation of the property to bring the first floor above base flood elevation, mitigating the flooding hazards. That's available. The state has a small allocation annually through that program. However, we did have a town this year that submitted 5 separate applications, and because of the amount of money annually in that program that was not applied for, the state of New Hampshire is receiving about $2.1 million instead of our allocation of about a $500,000 that gets set aside for New Hampshire. So we got substantially a lot more money in that. After recent flooding events, we're starting to see more and more communities applying for these programs. After meeting with Mr. Karen and the residents down on Brookview, I went back and looked at the severe repetitive loss claims. There is one property down there that has made the severe repetitive loss property list. Really, by looking at that, having that property into an application, I think the town has a better than fair chance of receiving funding through any of these programs. So, especially with the repetitive nature of the area. So, part of the program, again, there is a catch. There's 75% federal funding in the pre-disaster mitigation grant program, which means that there would have to be a 25% local match. That match does not have to be hard cash out of your budgets. That cash can be made up of in-kind services or donations or anything along those lines. If you were to do the demolition with your Public Works Department, their time and equipment and everything can be added to the program and used as match. The other thing, I don't know if the town of Londonderry receives any community development block grant money. That's the only other federal program that can be used to match this federal program because it does lose its federal identity once it's passed to the communities. So community development block grant funds can be used to match the programs. The match requirements under the Flood Mitigation Assistance Program, as of this year, we just got word that that match will not be a 25% match. It's going to be 90% federal funds, 10% local match. But again, that's only for eligible for homes that are protected with a policy through the National Flood Insurance Program.
I have some questions. I'll open it up to the board in a second. As I look at Brookview Drive, first thing comes into mind is I'm trying to determine how many pieces of property are we talking that are potentially affected by this.
You're talking about closely about 8 houses, 4 that would be eligible to be destroyed, and I'd say 4 to be elevated.
And would yours be one of those?
Mine would be one of those.
Yours is on the
to be
backside,
elevated.
and your neighbor to your left,
Right.
which is 11, are they? So which ones, I'm trying to,
Talking the 4 that are down in the cul-de-sac.
okay, you're
They get the
talking
most severe,
11, 13, 15, and